Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to our weekly review series on WandaVision. This is episode 4, and the biggest surprise for me is that these episodes apparently have names now. So let me find the title real quick. This is episode 4, We Interrupt This Program. So this was the biggest shocker for me this morning when I watched this new episode. When we've been putting the thumbnails together, we talked about that we hope they haven't really got long names for episodes. And thankfully, it was always like episode 1, 2, 3. And then I saw today they've given them all names. So I'm guessing that's going to be a thing for the rest of the franchise. So as always, this is going to be a completely spoiler-filled discussion. So if you haven't seen this episode, please go and watch this episode if you haven't already. This answers pretty much everything. So we're going to do a deep dive into this episode, talk about some of the links to the MCU itself and where we think it's going. So you have been warned. Go and watch it. Come back to us. But before we go into it, just over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So we want to know what your thoughts are on this. We've been speculating like crazy over the last couple of weeks, and we want you to comment along with us. Did you get any theories right? Did you really? Don't lie to yourselves. Did you get any of them wrong? We want to know, because we're going to go over some, and this is the A to the Q&A that is WandaVision, I guess we can say. So do comment along with us tonight. If you do enjoy this video, do like it, do obviously share it, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. We're live every Friday at 8 p.m. for the WandaVision videos, and Marvel out running short TV shows. There's plenty more Marvel things coming across the next few months, so do stick around if you do like those. And the best way to find out when we're going to be doing our videos are finding us on our social medias. So we've got Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. They are our two most active social media accounts. We announce all of our content on there as well as doing on the videos. We've got a very special video coming this Sunday, which we might as well tease now. For us guys in the UK, maybe not Australians, we're in another lockdown, as you can all tell. So me, Chris, Tate, and return to the channel, we have Tom, are going to be doing 20 unique films to watch during lockdown. So these are essentially 20 recommendations. They're not blockbusters. They're not A-list films. You might have heard of a couple of them, maybe the odd indie drama, the odd documentary, but we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So that's going to be this Sunday evening. So do check us out for that. Something a bit different, and then of course we've got our normal content which we'll go through later on. But that being said, we are here to talk about WandaVision episode 4. And you're right, the title names, they were weird. I think the first episode dropped and they announced it like randomly like a week and a half later, like, oh, they actually had names. I was like, really?
Yeah, I don't know when they did this. I don't know if this was like a thing they started last week. I've only just seen it now, clicking back on the episodes. Yeah, so now we've got apparently filmed before a live studio audience is now episode 1. Don't Touch That Dial is episode 2. Now in Color is episode 3. And as I said at the beginning, We Interrupt This Program is episode 4. So yeah,
all
it's
TV messages, all TV references too, which I quite liked. And we get a hell of a lot of TV references today, and no advert, which I've just realised, which is actually quite a shame. But either way, it's because we might as well start things with the really obvious, talking about this. This was the first non-sitcom episode. I didn't think we'd get this, in all honesty. I think me and you spoke maybe off air, maybe last week as well. I can't remember, but I thought, oh, I wonder how they're going to balance having the sitcom world and having an outside storyline, because it's not the easiest things to change, let alone when you've got aspect ratios as well, all those other little things, and it can be very jarring for people watching at home. And Marvel had an answer to that theory too. We're just going to set like 90% of the episode in modern day, and then we'll revert into that world when we have to. And it even really wasn't the sitcom vibe until the last couple of seconds. So I want to say your thoughts on that right away.
Yeah, well, I'm going to open with Carl's comment right away, because that's pretty much echoing mine. This episode put everything in context, and it absolutely did. Now, I was kind of in agreement with you in thinking that we would get all the answers to everything that's going on in the very last episode, or maybe like a sort of like 2-part finale kind of situation, because it's 9 episodes, right? I think I asked that last week. It's 9 episodes in total, so we're kind of roughly at the halfway point, and they just gave us most of the answers. Now, I don't think they've given us everything. They've given us a considerable chunk. Certainly a lot of the glitches and weird goings on in the previous few episodes we now have context and backup for, so we know where it's leading to. This was almost like a parallel story. This wasn't really sort of advancing the story in time. This was almost like a past and running alongside present to everything that we've seen previously. I'm actually really grateful we got this. Now, I was kind of thinking that now that we have all these answers and we know that there's this sword based outside and everything they're sending in, when we then go back to the sitcom, and I do think that next week it's going to snap back to that sitcom, we know that it's going to go into the 80s, 90s, and even beyond that as well. Is it going to lose some of the mystique to it, lose a lot of the mystery to it? Now we have context to know everything that's going on the outside. So that's sort of my biggest concern at the moment. I don't think it will, because I think there's still plenty of questions that we still need answers to, specifically the Wanda and Vision stuff, like how the hell is Vision here? What's going on with all of that? So I think there's still enough, but I do think that this was the shake-up that maybe the series needed. One of my concerns was that we had 3 very samey episodes. It was sitcom situation. We talked about that it was kind of filler, and then you had like a 5 to 10 minute bit at the end, which was your tease for something's not quite right. And they repeated that 3 times. And I think that had we have not had an episode like this at this point, and say we had like another 70s episode or an 80s episode and the similar kind of structure, I think the show would have really ran out of steam. So this was like a nice shake up to the structure of the show and how it's been progressing. So now that we've had this, I think that when we do switch back to the sitcom, I'm sure they're going to do something different with it, or that's going to advance itself as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part too, is that we always speak of, we can follow this, even aside from WandaVision, Marvel, we can follow it because we do film stuff. Can the generic film audience, brackets 90% of people that watch this stuff, can they follow it properly? Mm-hmm. And today was the big one, where if there are people that have stuck around that aren't in the know, that don't know things going on, this will be the one that sort of is not course correction, because that sounds like it's gone wrong, but this is as Carl said, as you said, it's the context you need, that you're getting the answers to some of the questions, the core ones. Why is she there? What's going on? And we don't have the answer to why specifically is she there. There are some things I don't know, that I don't know if it's because I didn't pick it up or if I need to see it again, but the FBI missing person, I'm assuming it was her. I might be wrong, or if it's someone else in the village, but that's the point they either dropped or I've missed, so I'm not too sure what the answer is on that one. But I thought it was really good to get this new insight and also develop some of the other characters, because there's not, politely put, there's not really been much development for Wanda or Vision, because we know it's set in the alternate reality, but what it's done, it's enhanced their relationship and enhanced their chemistry. But actual character progression, we don't know what's going on and where until today. Supporting characters the same. And I think this show certainly did a tremendous amount. Even for Wanda, to a point, we got a bit more on her. We did get a kind of, what would we call it, like behind the scenes sort of. It cuts. When we do get to, I know it's jumping at the end, that we've got the modern day cameras, widescreen, everything, and then I know it's the final bit, but when it transcends back into the TV aspect ratio for the TV bit, I love those kind of things. But the fact we got to see like kind of modern day Wanda, you know, when she does the weird hand things and you get the little red lightning. I love seeing them, and I think the episode gave us not just a breakaway from her and Vision, but I think it gave us the right amount of screen time for them. That yes, this is WandaVision, they're the main characters, but sometimes it's nice to get away from leads in a TV series, and I think this one did everything right. It still had them and raised this question of who are they, why are they there, what's going on, but we were able to find out some of those answers via other people, not them talking it out loud and basically telling us. Instead, we got to see it for ourselves from the other perspectives, and I think that was something I didn't expect. Sort of going back straight to the opening scene, I did not expect to be seeing the. I know they call it in-house. The blip is the canonical term for the snap. Don't know why they can't use the snap. I guess because they didn't know, really. To be fair, with 5 billion people, but that was quite traumatic to watch. Love Endgame, and you know, there's been plenty of Endgame discussions, and it's not to make a boring dig on Spider-Man, but in Spider-Man Far From Home, whichever one, they make a passing joke like, all the students have come back to life. Here's a video behind the scenes, and it's like insert comedy effects. Did a basketball team like blip onto a marching band or something strange? It was glossed over. It was done for comedy, and I kind of get that because that is Sony. It is the MCU. It's still Kevin Feige involved, but that was like a Spider-Man thing. Whereas they was like, how do we get a bit of drama? Let's have a character who obviously we're new with, and we're going to get a lot of character development in the opening 5 minutes, which is her waking up in a hospital ward when her mom's gone in for operation, and 5 years down the line, her mom passed away within that 5 years, and the nurse last one. I thought that was tremendous. I think that had the right amount of character development for the characters straight away, from like a Rambo. which I know you're getting scripts of the Rambo name, but those opening scenes I thought were perfect. And I think to be this is phase 4. This is the beginning of phase 4. This is a new reality. I thought that was really important, seeing those moments, because the pandemonium behind her as well, things like it just felt like there were stakes to it and there was a realization of what was going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, the Spider-Man comments are really good. And I don't want to harp on Far From Home too much, because that's a completely different review for another time. But it was that inconsistency, and I remember that going from that one movie straight to that one, and as you said, like played for laughs, and it kind of cheapened the event as it took place in the Avengers films. Whereas this felt like a logical progression of what would happen. You know, people are coming back, and there's just absolute pandemonium in this hospital. People freaking out, doctors just leaving, saying like, "I need to call somebody. Like, I've got family I need to call." And yeah, I mean, it completely grounds you in that situation. I never thought we'd be going back to that. I thought maybe they'd. I mean, it's a big cataclysmic event, right? As history goes in the world. So I thought we'd get mentions, but to actually go back to that moment where people come back says a lot for Monica's character as well. So I did really appreciate that. That's kind of her episode in this one to a point. We just get more context with her and everything, and even just ties into the greater MCU, including characters that are returning as well, sort of supporting characters. Now, one I completely missed, which was the police, like the FBI guy, which you told me was from Ant-Man 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's a film I've only seen once, and I can't really remember it all that well. But when you mentioned that, I could vaguely remember a character like that in the film. But the biggest one for me, and I don't know why I was kind of happy to see her, because she was never a character that I really liked in the films that she was in, was Darcy, Kat Dennings' character from the Thor films, or at least the first 2 Thor films. But it was kind of cool to see her back, and it made sense as well. It didn't feel just like, oh, we've got to shoehorn in a character. You know, that was her livelihood. That's what she did, and it makes sense that they'd bring her in. I was thinking, like, are we going to get Skarsgård in it as well? Did he properly die? I can't remember. Or did he get snapped out of existence, or is he still around? I can't really remember.
Yeah, and this was weird that I'm not saying, because I wasn't the biggest fan of Darcy. I didn't mind him at all. I didn't know.
It was out of place comment. It was like slapstick, comedy, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to be fair to Kat Dennings, is it Two Broke Girls she's in? Like, that show's been massive, and she has done a lot of comedy stuff, and it just didn't suit what they wanted to do with Thor. That's how I always saw it as, that bringing the sort of Marvel humor into, at the time, was the fantasy film and all that kind of stuff. And there was a place for this, because you get the openings, you know, what are you guys all here for? And it's when I'm a chemical engineer, I'm this engine. If you really think about it, and to be fair to Marvel, that if you want to bring in a perspective of somebody else, that I don't think they said we must have Kat Dennings back. I think they thought, okay, this is going on. Is there a way we could bring in some characters we've seen before? Like, they probably sounded logistically who could actually be there. And you'd probably say Skarsgård, who had that moment in Avengers 1. He was doing all the scientist stuff for that. Then I guess you could say you've got Natalie Portman, who's not going to come out for TV. She's very busy filming Thor 4 right now. There's that. And probably, you know what, Darcy would work. And I think the whole sitcom vibe as well, when you've got someone that's been successful in sitcoms, that it's even more of an obvious choice to bring her back in. And as well, I forgot the name of the actor that plays, I think it's Jimmy Woo, the FBI agent's name. I've seen him in a lot of comedy stuff, and obviously he's most famous playing Kim Jong-un in The Interview. And Ant-Man being the comedy Marvel film, I thought there was a welcome base, because I like Ant-Man too. I know it's not everyone's favourite, and I don't like it anywhere near as much as the first, but I really liked his character, and he was quite funny when he was on screen with Paul Rudd. And I like the fact that they even carried on the little knee stroke of him trying to do magic tricks, because he finally gets his FBI card out of his hand without anyone seeing it. Sorry. So it was quite well.
Randall Park, the actor. Sorry, I just found his name. Yeah.
And I just thought they suited it, and also they're not too big a names. Like, if you'd have chucked in, I don't know, if you'd have chucked in Natalie Portman to go back to her, that's way too big a name for a TV show. That would have been like, we must put her in all the posters, even if it's going to be for 10 seconds. You know, like the Mark Hamill appearing in The Mandalorian. Fair play that they didn't market that, but right now, to me, bringing Luke Skywalker in is too big a name for The Mandalorian. That's a testament to the show. And I think it's the same with this, that WandaVision isn't at a point where it can get away with that. Maybe there's going to be a humongous guest coming in down the line. Who knows? Maybe Doctor Strange at the end, because it's all going to tie into Doctor Strange too. I just thought it was nice to see them, but I'm glad that they were brought in because the story needed them. And I think if you're going to have this new perspective of how do we bring in people, you know, new characters. Monica, yes, we saw her as a child in Captain Marvel, that's set 20, 30 years before this one. Can't remember the exact setting of that. And I just kind of sat there thinking, saying that we've got her character development in a really good way in the opening scene. We've got that she works for Sword, that her mom helps engineer Sword, that she's established, and I liked all those little things. And obviously, it's hinting that there's been space missions as well. I liked all that sort of Marvel-y thing. But then when she's in Westview, then what's going to happen with the others? And if you'd have brought in 2 new characters, I think it would have been really hard to get to know them. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think, at least with Darcy, she's recognizable. Most people have probably seen her in at least a Marvel film. But if you'd have brought in a brand new Marvel character, I think that maybe could have been too much for something like this, especially when it's ultimately a supporting role in Wanda's TV show. You know, this is the outside narrative, not the forefront. So it doesn't need to be a big name.
Yeah, no, and as I said, like their characters make sense in the world. I do have a problem with sort of how they handle Kat Dennings' character, though, in that you've got Sword, right? This huge scientific team with all this equipment and all this wonderful knowledge, extraterrestrials, everything. She comes in 5 minutes and just goes, "Oh well, TV signals are being broadcast from there. Just get me a TV and I'll plug it in." I'm like, really, no one in the team sort of thought that or realized that those were TV waves with all the inexhaustible resources these guys have and scientifically minded. She's in for 5 minutes and just goes, "Oh, it's a TV station," and then get me an old-fashioned TV and watch it. I feel like someone would have been able to pick that up pretty quickly, especially with how quickly she picked it up. I get that it gets the plot moving, but just in context of these scientific minds, they're just kind of all stood around looking kind of incompetent, whereas Kat Dennings is just doing everything in the episode. So I wasn't too keen on that, but the biggest question I have is it's still the sitcom thing. It's like, was this made as a sitcom just as a ploy to have a kind of a TV show of a Marvel thing? I don't know if I'm explaining that well in that
no, I know
we need a kind of hook for a Marvel show. Oh, let's just make a sitcom and then just let's shoehorn that sitcom aspect into what's going on. And maybe they'll never even explain why it's coming out like a sitcom, because Wanda as a character doesn't really strike me as a character that would have been growing up watching TV sitcoms from back in the day, living in, I can't remember the place where she grew up. It's a fictional place, isn't it? I think like European country or whatever. At least they've never mentioned it. There's never been like a running joke thing where she's, been watching sitcoms or anything like that in the previous Marvel films. So it feels very random as a medium for this show. And that's the one thing that I want them to explain, because if we get to the end of 9 episodes and it's like they never explain why Wanda is broadcasting this world in the style of a sitcom, then that's going to be a problem to me. So that's still my biggest question, is that obviously the Vision stuff as well, but specifically why a 60s, 70s progressively go. And they kind of hint at that as well. I think Kat Dennings mentions that it's going through the decades. Why is that? And we don't have an answer to that yet. So hopefully we get that answer before this series finishes.
That's what I like, to bring in that real world, because although it's set in the MCU, the questions being asked by the people within the, I guess you could say within Sword, are the questions that we are asking, that everyone at home is asking. And I'm not saying it's being meta. No, it's absolutely not, because they've written that to be like that. And even to put on the whiteboard, they wrote, "Why TV show and is Vision alive?" And I love those little things, because there are questions. And I think the episode's confirmed a specific Vision answer, which we'll get into properly in a bit, because I've got my theory, which is dark. But the sitcoms is going to be fascinating, because I think that's set for a big internal storyline. I think that'll be a big revelation. I think there will be reasoning for it. We don't know that yet, but now that we know as a viewer that they're approaching this as yes, we know this is bonkers. That's why we've got a second storyline happening around Westview. I think everything has been planned to perfection by Kim Major. I'm not getting on the high horse yet. It's 4 episodes out of 9. But I think this show is heading in a direction where this looks like, after 9 episodes, this could be one of the most outrageously ballsy things Marvel's done. And we've said that so many times over the year. A talking tree. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's just got a fascinating setup, and the premise is working, and the outside stuff's working, and even the weekly thing. I still would have preferred those. Certainly the first 3 I still think should have dropped together. But they're slowly justifying the week gap, and it builds up word of mouth, it builds up talking, because if we'd have had them all at once, we're 80 minutes in with this episode. Take away all the credits. We're about 80 minutes in with this episode today. That's like less than an hour and a half of a film. and you've got 30 answers, whereas we're now been here 3 weeks debating this, discussing this, and I think that format once again is working. Maybe they got the first couple of episodes wrong doing it, but it's certainly an interesting take from Marvel with this, and I think now we're getting the real world coming into it. It's going to feel like it should be weekly because we're getting the gaps, we're getting the questions, and ultimately, as far as today's episode goes, it was essentially a recap. Once we've introduced Darcy, once we've introduced all the other characters with Sin, we get the sitcom stuff. It's a recap because, okay, they're on episode 1 now. It's kind of like when your friends start binging TV shows. It's like, they're on episode 1. This bit's going to come up, and it's when they start IDing people. Episode 2 is going to come up. Episode 3 is going to come up. And I love these little things that they were playing at, that they were watching, because we know that someone was always watching it on the Mac. Some weirdo on Twitter did freeze frames and claimed it was Darcy all along because he knew Kat Dennings' hands from watching the show.
Oh, that's weird. That's.
I know. I just had to bring it because I was so creeped out when I saw that on Twitter. Speaking of social media, it's worth mentioning Marvel's apparently in a lot of trouble. So apparently they've released a minute clip yesterday, and apparently the minute clip was not full of spoilers, but gave away a lot of what happened today. People were kicking off saying they didn't do any clips, nothing for the previous 3, but they decided to drop a clip for the one episode, which is going to make all the more context. So there's been a bit of a Twitter storm. A lot of people kicking off at one another for spoilers for this. A lot of photos of Vision going around. So it has been a war zone. So obviously we are doing spoilers anyway, which is way too late to say. But it's interesting that Marvel were willing to share something so important as well, knowing that people just needed to wait a day to watch 20 minutes to get the answers they needed. But yeah, it's hard to talk about what happened, really. I mean, we've got some of the big story points. You mentioned before we hit live that we have some answers for some of those big plot points, I think. I mean, we'll go into the property one, but we've got obviously the helicopter, we've got the radio, and I guess we've got the man in the what's it called? And
it's like the beekeeper. Well,
the drain, the beekeeper.
He didn't go in with a beekeeper costume, but that's sort of how it was projected in the world, wasn't it? I'm trying to think if we had anything else. Well, we know who's watching the recording. Obviously, that was that shot from the end of episode 1, wasn't it? I'm trying to think if there's any more. And then, as you mentioned, we get sort of context as to what actually happened with Monica's character when she was in that room with Wanda towards the end of the episode, which recontextualizes, and we know what happened with her there when she got thrown out of this weird sort of dome thing. I'm just going to go to a comment from Carl here. So this is going back to the scene where you have the FBI agent Wu with Monica before they go into the place, and they're sort of talking to 2 police officers. When the police officers were in denial about Westview, just wondering when they looked at the sign, did they see Eastview? I thought it still said Westview on the sign. If I remember right.
It might be what they see in their head, because they're claiming that Westview's never been a thing. So I'm wondering if she's programmed them to be. What's that old school kind of thing like? You know when you're playing like a video game and it's always like turn away, no, you can never come in. It was like one of those like programmed characters. So I wondered.
Well, I wondered because like the police officers were kind of weird how they were acting. I wondered if they were part of the world. Maybe there's some like security that she's put in place. But if they were and it was in the world, then I think they'd be a bit more in keeping with the sitcom kind of vibe, or maybe have sort of like period, police officer clothes on from that time, from like the 70s. So. I don't know, but one of the questions that I'm asking myself as well is that when Monica went into this world, she seemed like she knew some things that were going on, but she was almost like split in like 2 worlds between the sitcom world and as she was beforehand. So I'm assuming this world just completely changes you and just everything within the world and almost makes you start to lose your mind. And that's why I'm thinking, because you've got the next door neighbor who was like soaring through the wall, and then you've got the one who you said's in a bunch of like American comedies, the main woman who's sort of the next door neighbor as well, who's been in all 3 of the first episodes. I can't remember the actress's name. I'm wondering if they've all been, I'm assuming they've been sent in as well at some point, although I don't think they like, I don't think they're one of the ones in the case files, are they, of the actors that they find, the real people?
I was going to say those 2 they haven't ID'd, which is funny.
Yeah,
they're like the main 2 in 2 of the episodes, and that's what I find interesting. They've still got some question marks. The one everyone's talking about, I've forgotten her name from Step Brothers and Parks playing the next door neighbor. Yeah. She is the one everyone thinks is going to be the big bads or have the answers for us all to find out. I think that could be a red herring for something else going on. There's a couple of big things, obviously, that people want to discuss. I think something. I mean, the beekeeper, right? It's best to call him. I think he's got a name like Agent Franklin or something. I'm not seeing rumors saying he's a big famous villain, so I'm assuming the name is a random name. We still don't know what's happened to him because we just get the rewind. Did she throw him out? Probably not, because they didn't carry around. Or did she do something insane? I think what's fascinating with this sort of internal world of hers is that it is all by her rules, that when she throws Monica out, when there's the moments like that, we got that scene extended, which was really cool because we needed that. I think that doing the whole sitcom stuff was odd, but it was really cool to watch the sitcom from the other side because we get to see the scenes and then being rewinded, but they get the cuts. They get the sharp cuts in the studio. Well, not in the studio, in the tent outside, I guess. And I think there's a lot more things going on that we don't have the answers to that have happened in the first 2 episodes. I'd be very intrigued to see it all on a rewatch. I think it's a show that's going to work well in a rewatch sense, that building up to the next few episodes. So I might do it very soon, but I'm just trying to think of some of the other things. I mean, the helicopter. My theory was that Monica Rambeau tried to get in via helicopter. It crash landed. How wrong was I? It was a drone that vanished.
It's a shame because I really like that theory about the whole PIM technology shrinking down and going in that way. I thought that would have been cool, but it is what it is. It's fine. It's a drone.
Yeah, and I think it also makes it a bit more fascinating that there is something even more peculiar going on, that she's controlling everything internally and externally that happens. And what I like is that because she didn't know Monica, that's how she didn't get to know her. And she obviously knew all the other citizens, and that theory which Kat Dennings and the others mentioned, that she might have only put her spell on the people that are in Westview, not people externally. So I think Monica, we'll get some more answers soon, because she only really got sent out right at the end again. In all honesty, the episode sort of timeline-wise is parallel to where we were at the end of episode 3, so we'll get her story of what she was trying to do or what she said to them, but it's setting a really interesting premise for what's going to come next. Now, the next episode, I think I'm the same as you. I think we're going to get back to I think we're going to go to the 80s. I don't know if it's going to start off as an outright sitcom. I think if it does, I'm not going to be surprised. If it doesn't, I also won't be surprised. If we had, say, 10 minutes of the real world, and then like the next show started airing, and then it cut to watching it, that's something which I think could work. But I'm in a situation now where, because I've enjoyed this episode so much now, I really don't want to see it cutting from sitcom to real world. I'd quite like put 10 minutes there, 20 minutes sitcom, or sitcom first, then the real life stuff, because I think it's set it up in a far more interesting perspective, and for everything that happens in Wanda's series, we know we're going to get a form of answer potentially on the real world later on. So it's got a really interesting dynamic for the last few episodes now.
Yeah, that's my biggest question, is how this is going to frame the rest of the franchise now that the rest of the series, now that we've had this episode where it is. I don't want it to cut between the two mid-episode, I don't think. Maybe like as it has been doing so far, like at the end of episode 1, where the final shot of the episode is a callback to sort of like the modern world, what's going on the outside, and little clips like that are fine with me, but I don't want it to sort of be one scene in the world, one scene outside, one scene back in. I don't want that, because I think that would ruin the immersion of it, and take away that unsettling quality. There's another comment here from Carl. This is something that I missed. I didn't even notice this one. I noticed the Beach Boys song on the radio was Help Me Rhonda, but it sounded like Help Me Wanda. I'm going to have to go back through that because I didn't catch that, but that's really cool if they did that. And did you notice how uncomfortable Vision looks at the end of the episode? Yeah, we were going to talk about that. It was like you could see Wanda was crazy. Let's talk about that, because this was my favorite bit of the entire episode. And there was so many great bits in this one episode, but reaffirming dead Vision was chilling. He just walks in and it's like pale, all color drained from his body, massive hole in his head where Thanos ripped out the Soul Stone. That was incredible to see. And one of my biggest fears with this series, and maybe they could still do this, I don't want them to, is are they going to bring Vision back? And I really hope they don't. But just to reaffirm that, no, he is actually dead, and in this reality, and it's that reality and the dream reality that she's in, sort of like clashing with the two, where she's conscious of it. Of course she's conscious of it, and maybe she's masking it and creating her perfect world. I think that's pretty much what it is at this point. But you have a really unsettling, incredibly dark and macabre theory about this, which I want you to share with everyone, because if Marvel go in this territory, I mean, I kind of want them to, because it's really warped and messed up. But go ahead. This was before we went live. You mentioned
it's dark. It's not quite Wonder Woman raping a man unconscious dark, but my theory is that Wanda is literally puppeteering Vision's dead body. Now, I was terrified. I don't think it was ever going to happen, but there's that 1.1% chances like surely Vision's not alive, and it's like because we were talking before we went live. With Marvel, most modern pictures, Fast and Furious, we were laughing about as well. Star Wars has done it. Somehow Vision returned. He's somehow we think we know how he's returned. So the dead Vision, that's one of the most terrifying images I've ever seen. I remember watching Infinity War when he died. I was like, oh, that's a bit grim. Like he went to that grey color really quickly. In came the conspiracy theories, like, oh, Grey Vision is a thing. He's a hero. He's a this. I was like, he's a dead. And I think that was the one dead person Marvel will never 180, because if you it's one thing to do Loki, it's one thing to do. Well, I was going to say Black Widow, she's staying dead. To me, right now, on paper, Vision and Black Widow are the two people who should be at the bottom of ever coming back to current timeline alive. Mm-hmm. That's why WandaVision's a strange concept. Like, like we know there's something else going on. I think that's the sitcom vibe, and that's what's going to be fascinating seeing this story unfold. But you got a really quick glance. Maybe it was like half a second or something. I was like, is that Vision? Like, it sort of like throws you like, whoa, what did I just see? And it's like, have I seen? It's ticking in your head, and then it cuts back to him talking, and it's like, this is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. It looks like the Autons from Doctor Who, from like the original ones from like 2005, not the original, I guess, the originals of the reboot. And I loved it, like the clump out of the head, and that's what I like, the fact that she is so haunted by the reality that that's why I think it's his puppet. Like, I can see why she wants to program him to have the stone, to be normal, to be purple, all of this, but the reality is that he died in Infinity War. And maybe it is a bit too much of, I think she's literally gone back to Wakanda, took his body, and just took it to a village in America. Who knows? But it's a plausible theory because it doesn't really make sense as to how else he'd be able to function, to talk. I mean, we already know she's powerful. Is it a projection of her? I don't think so. I think it's his body, and that she's just tampering with it to bring it to life when it really isn't.
So do you think Vision in world, when, as Carl mentioned, acting really sort of like awkward and acting like she's crazy, do you think that's her own sort of like internal logic, then question what I'm doing is really messed up, and that's kind of the reflection of that? With I think
I've not thought of that. I've not thought of that, but I think absolutely. I think there's the uncomfortable reality of the situation, and even last week when the rewinds, when he says, there's something not quite right going on, the neighbors last week being scared to tell him stuff that was happening as well, and maybe he is the Tyler Durden to the narrator. Maybe Marvel's got that deep. But I don't know. It's just fascinating that I think, because it was a great episode regardless of the Vision thing, but I think the Vision moment just solidified that there's not that doubt in anyone's mind that he is dead. I think it settled it, and now it's gonna become the mystery of, okay, so now what really is going? Because we're getting a hint of what's going on. We're getting the core of it. She's projecting a sitcom onto the world, but now we need the answers. And I think they've answered the initial questions. They've answered the initial speculation to get us thinking, but the core plot still remains. And I think that's what we're going to find out over the next couple of weeks. I'm very excited to find out. And the other thing, I'm not in a rush to find out. That's what sounds horrible, but I'm really liking what they're doing. And I'd quite like them, with this whole sitcom stuff, as they're growing into the areas I'm more familiar with. I'd quite like them to carry on with that sort of 80s, especially I think 90s sitcoms are the ones I'm sort of most familiar with. Well, noughties don't really count because I grew up in them, but when it hits those 90s ones, I don't want interruptions of the real world. Just give me a 90s sitcom. Give me like Friends, but WandaVision, they're going to do it.
Prince of Bel-Air or something like that. That would be funny.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so many possibilities going, but I think episode 4 was exactly what they needed to do right now.
I think that's won a lot of people over as well. I think maybe if people were I was feeling a little bit frustrated, not completely, because I've stuck with shows before like Lost, where I've gone 5.5 series of questions being thrown at me and no answers and waiting for something. We actually get more answers in this than we probably did in all of Lost. That's a different story though. Carl says, I actually find it incredibly sad the lengths Wanda is going to have the perfect life she always wanted. Going to your theory, I want the final scene of this series to be like a SWAT team or them finally breaking into the world, smashing down a door, and Wanda's in this like completely dilapidated apartment, like rotten floorboards, mold on the walls, a TV in the corner with like a famous American sitcom on there, and her just like with her powers controlling a dead body of Vision. And then they just sort of like go to her and just say like stop, and then she just breaks down in tears, hit credits. That's how I would end this series, and they're never going to because it's Disney and it's Marvel, but I want it to go really messed up at the end where she's confronted with the horror.
I can see all of that. I can also see a bit of X-Men Dark Phoenix with Jean Grey. I mean, not Dark Phoenix, X-Men 3, Final Stand, that, you know, when she's in those weird trance bubble things, and then like, you know, Hugh Jackman will like speak to her and then it just goes wrong. I think we're going to get something like that. I'm fascinated to see where they go, what they want to do with it. But, you know, as Spider-Man now give us, is this an Avengers level threat? You know, because she is the most powerful one. Maybe it's going to take a Supreme Sorcerer to come in and change things. But also, one thing that we haven't spoke about now, which I'm going to ruin, we haven't spoken about the multiverse yet, and we've spoken about it every week.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we still think she's going to create the multiverse. I still think so too. And I think whatever they're going to do, I mean, there's a rumor doing the rounds on Twitter. It might not be true, so apologies for speculation, but there's a rumor this series has cost 220 mil. I refuse to believe that. But then at the same time, I think, hold on, they've literally built a village in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Still don't see it being 200 million. But if you're going to get some crazy over-the-top ending, you can tell they'll have put the money inside if they really wanted to. So I'm very curious to see what happens next, because it looks like Marvel's put everything into this. And I think, obviously, we haven't even seen Falcon Winter Soldier yet, but I think smart choice making this the first Phase 4 series. I know
go on, sorry. Go on.
I was saying, I know that Spider-Man we thought was Phase 4, but they did the Ant-Man, the unofficially still previous phase thing. But I think the year and a half long gap, coming back with a new format, a completely different style of Marvel content, I think might be not a game changer, but that is I think what people need rather than the usual actiony stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't hear about that with the budget. I hope that's not the case, because
I don't think it will be.
I don't need everything to explode, you know, in a Marvel thing. And I actually quite like the tone that it's striking at the moment. This could be a sort of more deeper, cerebral take on Marvel, and we've kind of applauded it for being different. Now, in the first episode, we talked about, could this be quite alienating to a lot of Marvel fans who do want the explosions, who do want the superheroes flying in every single second and everything you come to expect from the Marvel films? But this isn't a Marvel film. This is a TV show. And yes, there are going to be more appropriate series, as you just mentioned, where those explosions will be necessary to it, you know, i.e. the ones you just mentioned, probably Loki. I'm not actually sure, though. From the trailer of Loki, that looks kind of restrained as well in terms of what we've seen. But certainly Falcon and Winter Soldier, that's going to be a spy thing. Yeah, absolutely. There are going to be a bunch of action scenes in that, and that's fine. But this one, I think that, you know how a lot of people complained about the first Wonder Woman film, and I mean, a lot of people complained about the second Wonder Woman film, but that was a completely different situation. But how you had this tone that was struck with the first half of the film, and then it felt a bit rushed at the end, just having a comic book punch.
Yeah, you need.
Now, I didn't have a problem with that, because I was aware that, oh, well, this is a comic book thing, and, you know, Wonder Woman's got to go against her greatest antagonist, and there is going to be a punchable, but I could see that visually, that it was very different and was very separate from what had been established with the film before. And I'm worrying that that might be the case with this if they go in that route. But I mean, if the budget is that high, then clearly there's a lot that we haven't seen, because it's not going to be over 200 mil to make a couple of sound stages, especially when you're mirroring like a sitcom from those age. Because when they did those sitcoms, they didn't have like 200 million for that. Exactly. Even for the modern stuff, it feels very restrained. So if they can make it work in the story, well, I hope it is. But I mean, if they can make it work in the story, then that's fair enough. But I think that if you get to that by the end of the episode and then you go back to the series, I think it will have lost a lot. And sort of another thing that I was watching this and thinking about as well, you mentioned about how we have a week in between each episode. Now, we were sort of talking about this initially where we got the first two, and that we thought that this was a series where you kind of need all 9 episodes in one, because it is a complete story. And I'm very torn on whether I think that would have been the right idea for it, because on the one hand, I do like the week away, because like other TV shows, like I mentioned, Lost, it does give you that week in between where you can speculate, you can formulate your thoughts. Maybe you can find other little cutaways, or even like the things that Carl was mentioning, like the songs on the radio. which you probably might miss on a first viewing. So it gives you that opportunity to do that. But also, I think that it would benefit from a complete narrative.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I'm excited to, because I'm probably going to rewatch the whole series before episode 9. Probably like sit down in a day or put it on the background whilst I'm working on something, and I can see that exactly being true. And this is the thing, like, I binge sitcoms. I've watched, as of like about an hour ago, the first 8 seasons of Code Enthusiasm in like 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sat there like I really struggle watching sitcoms weekly, but I've done it when I've had to. And it's kind of like sitcoms are designed better to binge, but then it's tricky because obviously it's a different genre. But is that like, is it the age we're in, the era we're in of getting all at once? But I think the problem with the binging is that it doesn't get the talk, it doesn't get the discussion. You have to hide on social media for a day until the spoilers are done, and when it's too soon, when it's not too soon. So we got lucky with Cobra Kai, and there were a lot of people looking forward to that. And I think that would have been ridiculous to have waited a week for each week. Mm-hmm. But there's just something about WandaVision that's working weekly, and I think it is that intrigue. And I think when you've got a really intriguing show set up, if you do just chuck it all out on the same day, I mean, like I said, you've watched Lost, not me. If Lost had all come out in one day originally,
yeah.
And this is what I mean. Like WandaVision,
25 episodes, no way. 25 episodes, but no way. not for that.
You know what I mean? Though, like it's that. Is there enough happening to make you wait? And I think there is now. I think, like I said, episode 2 there was little hints. Episode 3 was perfect, and 4 now is like okay, and now we wait. And it's tricky because it's that whole boys thing. Because I criticize Amazon for releasing 3 episodes of The Boys, saying this needed to all be at once. But then there was nothing really, except one plot point at the penultimate episode. There was nothing really about The Boys that needed to have the wait. Whereas this does. This has. I need to know what's happening. We want to know what's happening, and I'm patient enough to wait for this. I don't know.
I think narratively, like in context of the world, the week wait also kind of helps because I know obviously it's not real, it's a Marvel series, but in context of the world, you can go, well, in this week there's been 100 more episodes of this show, and they've been trying to figure it out and send things in. And I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's like in context of the world that week, you can imagine that this is still going on all this time, and they're trying to figure it out. Whereas if you just binge it in 9 episodes, that it wouldn't have like a sense of scale or like a sense of urgency because you'd be done with it. And I was watching this episode today, and maybe it's because it switched to like the more modern, greater MCU stuff, like the people materializing back after the snap, and Kat Dennings coming back. And I was thinking, would this have worked as a film? And I don't think it would have, because I think it's got all the elements there. And I think that narratively, we know that it is going to tie into the greater MCU down the line. I think it's going to be a crucial component in the overall story moving forward into phase 4. And I feel like this is one that a lot of people need to see. And I was thinking, well, would this have made money if you had Marvel saying, after Black Widow, we've got a WandaVision film coming out, and it's going to be these 2, and it's going to be set in this TV world, and it's going to answer a lot of questions. Would it have still made money? And I'm really curious to know how much this would have made if this was like a feature film. Obviously, a lot would have to be cut out. If it was packaged as like a 2-hour Marvel film, would it have still made money? And I mean, I've got to think at the minute where you have a world where Guardians of the Galaxy can make an absolute killing at the box office. You have a relatively unknown character like Captain Marvel coming along, because people have sort of been conditioned now to go and see every single Marvel film where you just slap Marvel on there. It's going to make money. But I'm wondering if these characters would have been able to hold a movie together, if that would have worked, or if it was better on TV. I don't know. It's fun to think about, and how maybe it would have gone over as a film. But I think TV is the right place for it. My only thing is, if it is going to tie in drastically to the films, are enough people going to have watched this and had the inside information from this series to set them up for X amount of films down the line?
And this is the thing. This is why I think this works, because it's a hard sell as TV. I'm sorry, not TV. Sorry, it's film. And I go back to, you mentioned Captain Marvel, which is a perfect one, made over $1 billion. I think there's a couple of Marvel films that made $1 billion in a row. Some obviously hit $2 billion, like Endgame, Infinity War, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp came out in the summer after Infinity War. Probably the worst release that you could have wanted during the World Cup as well. And it made $622 million, which is a hell of a lot of money to many, many, many companies. It's still money to Disney. It's still good money. But when all the ones preceding it have been getting over $1 billion each, it kind of stands out, and all the ones after it got $1 billion each again. And that's the thing. I'm not saying, I mean, it's not a flop at all. It's kind of like Rise of Skywalker. Sorry to bring it up. It still made $1 billion, but it's by a country mile the lowest of the Disney era Star Wars releases, certainly of the episodic films too. You know, 2.1 billion, then I think 1.4 bill, then scraping $1 billion is not what people had in mind for that one. And I think WandaVision's a fascinating point to make. And I think with Marvel, because we can assume they're all going to be box office hits, it's kind of like how much of a hit is it going to be? Is it going to make 600 mil? Is it going to make 400 mil? Is it going to make $1 billion? And I think this would have been like 400, 500 mil train. It's such a hard sell to the public. And I think, you know, we all know Scarlet Witches, and I like a character, I like Vision. They're not big enough characters to carry a film by themselves. And I know that's really stupid saying that when Marvel's a thing, but even Captain Marvel, you've got the name, you've got Brie Larson, who's an Oscar-winning actress. You've got specific things. You've got big actors in there. Like you've got, oh God, how have I forgotten his name? Who's now young Dumbledore.
Jude Law.
Jude Law. There were big names in that. Sam Jackson was going to be in it, familiar ingredients, but WandaVision, there wasn't anything really. I mean, not sound horrible, but the best thing WandaVision's had going for it pre the last 3 weeks is that it's the first Marvel Studios TV series. Mm-hmm. It's a sitcom and it's on Disney Plus, and that's what's fascinating. And it's an interesting conversation to be had down the line. I think once we've got the first 3 Marvel shows out the way on Disney Plus, I think Loki would have been a tremendous hit at the box office. You could have easily done 800, 900 mil. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think you're going to get good money. I think you're going to get good money as well. And it's a really interesting conversation to be had about all of it. But I don't know. It's curious. I think the more episodes we see, I think the more we're going to see what media benefited this. Like, I do think it is going to be TV. And I think with seeing as if the sitcoms are going to have this important, and sort of now we know internally within the series that the sitcoms are important. They've explained it in the show that why the sitcom is important. I think that benefits the TV argument even more now.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And the last thing, Carl's just done another comment. My only complaint is the episodes still feel too short. I don't know. I think this was the perfect length. I think if it went any longer, I think if it went to like 45 minutes to an hour each, I think it'd be overstepping the mark a bit, because how much sitcom stuff would you have in that instance? You know, I think they've been the perfect length at the moment, and you just get enough per episode. And then obviously when you get to the end and you've got like 9 episodes, you can view it all as like one big thing. I think that'd be interesting actually to watch it all as 9 together and see narratively how it flows that way, as opposed to the week to week and the intrigue in between. But no, I mean, if I'm going to give my overall opinions on this episode, I think it was a necessary episode for this point in the series. I think that if it had just gone back to the usual structure of sitcom after sitcom, then I think that would have just burnt itself out after a while. So this has added a nice change of pace to it. It was great to get some of those great sort of like MCU references in back there to keep us grounded in that world. And yeah, it's answered a lot of questions, and it's setting us up. I think this was like a nice halfway point almost. I think that now it's going to switch back to the sitcoms, and the biggest thing that is going to be my takeaway and what I want to see is that, are those sitcoms going to be changed up now that we, the viewing audience, have had all this outside information and we know what's going on outside and we know that something's not right? Is that going to shape how the next bunch of sitcoms in episode go over? So, I really enjoyed this episode.
I'm in the same bit as you. I thought it was a needed episode. The series needed it. The people at home needed it. We needed to get further understanding. And I think it's done enough to set you up for the... because it's crazy. I keep saying we're at the end of Act 1, but yeah, we are also just before the halfway point. So it's really important that we had that context to take into the next episodes. And I'm excited. I think now we're moving into the areas that, let's be honest, probably 80% of people watching are going to be far more knowledgeable with. Sort of growing up with that eras and whatnot. I think as we enter the more recent stuff, the ones people recognize more, that extra backstory is going to kick in more of what they're doing as a sitcom and why she's doing it. So I think it's all connected, and I think we're going to get our answers periodically over the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, I really hope so. And as always, we want to open it up to you guys as well to keep the conversation going, as indeed Carl does every single week, and he has done tonight in the comments. We're opening it up to you guys, so let us know what your thoughts on WandaVision are, the series as a whole so far, specifically this episode, where you think it's going, anything related. Maybe there's some things that we didn't catch, some Easter eggs that maybe we missed, because we know that each episode so far has been completely chock full of them. So yeah, please do drop us a comment and keep the conversation going in there too. And if you want to follow us on social media, we've got Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, and we do have some merch available as well. The link to the TeePublic link in the description down below. And this Sunday, we have a full house, not just me, George, and Tate. It is also going to be Tom, who we were surprised as anything to hear he wanted to be on the video as well, but it's really good to have him back. And that's going to be the 20 unique films to watch during lockdown. We enjoyed those discussion-based ones as well. Yes, we enjoyed doing the reviews, but sometimes it's just nice to go through a top 5 list for each of us. And that's one that we haven't really talked about so far. So I think there's going to be some prizes on that list too. And not just WandaVision reviews, but we also do retro reviews. So on Tuesday next week, which is the 2nd of Feb, we will be moving from the 80s, dragging ourselves kicking and screaming from the 80s into the 90s now, and we will be reviewing Heat, which is a film that both of us saw very long time ago, so I'm very much looking forward to watching that one again this weekend in preparation for Tuesday. So the fact of the matter is we've got a lot of content coming out, so please hit that subscribe button, all of that good stuff, and we'll see you on the next video, guys. Take care.